at?
Boston for Game 2 of the World Series.
There you go, scoop. Game 1 takeaway and also Game 2's price of admission. Also, Joel Embiid and whether flopping, his conduct becoming of a superstar. Cough, I am coughing, coughing.
He's getting points for a free trip to Boston.
He's getting points
It's
for doing
Around the
some work.
Horn,
That's what he's
the
getting
show
points
of
for.
competitive banter.
Thank you, sir.
Here's Tony Reale.
The ineffectiveness of Clayton Kershaw and Chris Sale. The Alex Cora versus Dave Roberts moment that resulted in Nunez's pinch hit home run off of Wood. The Sox taking Game 1. You can address it all, but one thing I want to make sure you heard on the telecast, Buck and Smoltz saying when Kimbrel came in, that former Dodgers closer Eric Gagne called up his buddy Alex Cora and told him Kimbrel was clearly tipping pitches in the Astros series. Then Kimbrel threw the perfect ninth inning. That's a former Dodger giving out the information that now closes out the Dodgers. Just thought that was fascinating. Clinton Yates, you're there. What's the takeaway from Game 1?
The takeaway for me is that the Dodgers had a lot more to bring on the away side than I think the Red Sox were giving them credit for. Listen, you talked about the broadcast. The other thing that Smoltz said in that broadcast is that Nunez is a great bad ball hitter from from lefties. And as soon as he said that, he went out. That was a button that Cora had to press. It wasn't as if this game was sort of out of reach, and that was something that happened as well. And as for the two pitchers, Sale and Kershaw, look, neither one of them looked great. But when they got to the second part of that lineup, I thought Kershaw actually looked a little bit better, and his fielders let him down than Sale did. I think that Cora knows he's going to have to do a lot more things than just roll his guys out there in order to beat the Dodgers in this series.
That's interesting to me. So your takeaway is the Dodgers, while they lost the game, are still sitting in a comfortable position and have a lot of pieces in place to give the Red Sox all they can handle in this series. Frank Isola, is that how you see it?
Here's Game 1, and you have an opportunity to set up your rotation. Say you have Chris Sale, your ace. You have Clayton Kershaw, your ace, and neither of them can get an out in the 5th inning. And I thought the game was really lost when the Dodgers tied the game up at 3. Kershaw goes back to take the mound, does not get an out, and then the Red Sox end up scoring 2 runs, and the Dodgers never came back after that. 12 pitchers used in the first game. This is what baseball's become, especially in this postseason. It's all about the bullpens now.
Kevin Blackistone?
Yeah, but you didn't think it was going to be about the bullpens in this particular game with Sale and with Kershaw. And I think what happened in this game was that the Dodgers really had to be perfect. And they weren't perfect in the clubhouse, they weren't perfect in the dugout, and they certainly weren't perfect in the field. You saw all the defensive miscues that they had, the fact that they were playing in Fenway for the first time this year, the fact that you had David Freese out there, you didn't have Corey Bellinger out there, you had Jock Peterson come into left field, quirky as it is, couldn't get to that blooper down the line. You had all those things come together, and then you had the pitching change late, which everyone was scratching their head about because you had one guy just throwing absolutely filthy stuff, 2 strikeouts, and then all of a sudden he's out the game. And despite the fact that the pitch that was a home run was low and looked like it was a good pitch, it got golfed out of there. So they didn't do anything.
So you don't think the Dodgers look
last
like a team that played in the World Series just last year, that the stage was a little bit bright for them last night? You lost a point because you had a Clay Bellinger instead of a Cody Bellinger. Israel Gutierrez, how about you?
Look, I thought that when you get those types of performances from those respective aces where it's not all about them, I thought this game was more about the Red Sox and what they've been doing the entire postseason. They've been mashing, and they've been doing it with guys who aren't necessarily in the middle of that lineup. Like last night, you had the game-deciding home run hit by Eduardo Nunez, who'd been bad. You know, you had Jackie Bradley Jr. doing it against the Astros and essentially taking over that series at times with his 2-out hits. It's just, this team is so good and so deep, so when you can get away with not having Chris Sale get even through 5 innings, which, by the way, 7 strikeouts in those 4 innings, so he was somewhat effective, just clearly not his usual self. But yeah, I think this team is just that good, and you look at what they've gone through, a 100-win Yankees team, a 103-win Astros team. These Dodgers, as I said the other day, they've been underachieving. They need to really step up and perform here, and that Clayton Kershaw performance was not what they needed.
For the tone that gets set from a first game of a series, Clinton, are you sensing the series is going to come down to the hitting or the pitching or the managers?
I think it's a managerial change. We saw, again, how well Alex Cora pressed that button, but again, he does it well at home. It'll be interesting to see how he does it on the road and what Roberts can do once they get back to Chapel.
Frank, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely, because you're going to go to the National League Park in Evaldi. You figure he's going to start Game 3. He was terrific up in the Bronx. He was terrific in Houston. But in this Game 3, now he's going to have to hit. So if the game is close, you might have to take him out. So we'll see how Alex Cora does managing in a National League ball.
You mean, oh, of course, because there's more decisions to make, because these guys aren't going to the bullpen enough in these American League parks. I understand what you're saying. Blackistone, question for you about David Price, because we had a horn. Is there less pressure on him tonight because of the win last night, or is there more pressure because it's David Price, yada, yada, yada?
No, I think it's less pressure because the last time we saw him, he was being doused with champagne, and he's at home where he's supposed to be better, and he's got a one-game lead. So I think it's less pressure.
Gutierrez, same question to you.
I think it's less pressure just because the odds are going to start working in his favor. 10 previous games before the two wins that he's pitched in the postseason. I think he doesn't.
So
really
you
feel
think
that
it's
much
the
pressure
odds?
because of
You
the game
think
one
the
win
odds
and
are
because
ever
of
in
the
his
Dodgers.
favor because they'll even out, regress to the mean, or in this case, actually progress to the mean? Okay, make a pick real quick. We'll get out of here. Yates, how about you?
Tonight, I think it's going to be the Red Sox. I asked David Price about this. He said he's having more fun. That's what I think he's going to do.
Isola?
No, I think tonight will be the Dodgers. And you know what? Tell those Dodger fans, those Red Sox fans who were so mean to Alex Rodriguez during the broadcast, and they were chanting something about the Yankees. Remember, it was former Yankee Eduardo Nunez.
It's not about the Yankees, all right? And I don't want to book here. Pick the game. Blackistone, Gutierrez, yell it out, please.
Red Sox.
Price and the Sox.
Thank you. We'll move on. Basketball now. 1 week into the season, there have been some incredible games and box scores, and Sixers Pistons exactly that. 133-132. And Blake Griffin in his first half of the season, healthy Blake Griffin mode, the game winner and one for 50. We're going to get to that. But in the part of this game that had everything, Embiid versus Drummond, and the comical flop from Embiid, which led to Drummond technical number 2 and ejection. And then the stand-up bit that Embiid gave everybody after the game where he admitted nothing about flopping and said he owned space in Drummond's head. Frank, how do you view Embiid last night?
The flop was conduct unbecoming a superstar player, and we all love Joel Embiid in a very Shaquille O'Neal way. He's larger than life, and he's got the funny comments. I think after a game that your team loses and someone on the other team scores 50 points, that might be the time to dial it back just a little bit.
Lynn Yates?
I was embarrassed for Embiid, and this comes from somebody who has no problem with a lot of trash talking on a lot of levels, but he jumped up like a child trying to blame his kid sister for something that he actually did wrong. He's out there gesticulating to the crowd and all this nonsense when it came to the referees. It was very awkward to see. You're supposed to be one of the biggest superstars in the league, and this is what you're deciding is going to occupy your mind? Come on, man. You can do better than this.
Israel Gutierrez?
What Embiid has to be careful of is making sure that somebody's still going to like him. The opposing fans won't, the opposition won't, the referees won't after they got away with, or he got away with one there. And pretty soon, if you keep this up, talking trash after a loss, your own teammates aren't going to like you. There's no reason for you to talk trash and say you're in Andre Drummond's headspace when he just beat you. And oh, by the way, you're not just responsible for Andre Drummond. Blake Griffin scored 50 on that team. Go ahead and protect the rim before you start talking.
KB?
Yeah, I would agree with all that. The only thing I'm wondering about is how the referees did not see that, how they let that go. On the one hand, Embiid got what he wanted, which was Drummond out of the game. But on the other hand, he totally pulled one on the referees. And this, I thought, had been a point of emphasis in the NBA over the last couple of seasons. And this time, those guys.
Kevin, you agree with Frank that it's conduct unbecoming of a superstar?
I don't know that's unbecoming of a superstar, but I agree that he's going to create some undue pressure on him in opposing arenas.
Frank, you want a last word, and we'll get to Blake Griffin?
We'll see what happens tonight. Milwaukee's undefeated. Philadelphia goes on the road. They didn't have Ben Simmons last night. Embiid played a lot of minutes. So you're talking about real estate in somebody's head. How will you perform on the second night of a back-to-back, which is what Drummond used to get on him about?
You want to make a prediction? How will he perform, Frank?
He will play well. I think Ben Simmons will play, and Milwaukee will remain undefeated.
Undefeated right now, the Detroit Pistons. Let's talk about them. How serious are you taking the 3-0 Pistons, and how real is Blake Griffin right now? Because here's what he said about his motivation after the game. The past 2-3 years, all I hear about is how bad I am, and I've been hurt, and I've had bad games. Israel, how do you hear Griffin there?
I hear a motivated guy. I think obviously everybody sort of dismissed him after he got traded away from the Clippers into Detroit. But it's the Eastern Conference. Like, what the criticism of him was always, at least as I remember it, is he's not good enough to be the number one on a great team. Well, he's the number one on this team. Doesn't need to be great to make the playoffs, doesn't need to be great to have sort of a revival for himself in Blake. And Blake's game is clearly evolving. You can see his athleticism isn't what it used to be, but the playmaking's there, the shooting from the outside is there. And Dwayne Casey is a heck of a coach. He's going to get a lot out of Blake Griffin there. So I just think a guy's really motivated, and we're probably going to see a career-type season from him. If he can stay
KB, what
healthy.
did you see from Griffin and what did you hear from Griffin?
I heard from Griffin, a guy who's playing with a chip on his shoulder, and good for him. It's going to benefit everybody around him and the team in Detroit. This is a guy I've been watching play since he was a freshman at Oklahoma. He works at his game. He gets better. He adds something to it every single year. Time was he couldn't shoot free throws. Time was he didn't have a jump shot. Now he's got all of that. And you saw what he did last night. He is capable of carrying a team. He's capable of handling the pressure. And oh, by the way, he's a comedian on the side, as I'm sure everybody knows if you've ever seen some of his YouTube stuff.
Speaking of, Frank Isola.
And, you know, Kevin, he can still get up. He did dunk on JoJo, as they like to call him, down in Philadelphia. You know, congratulations to Blake Griffin. Joins that club with the Pistons. That includes Dave Bing, Jerry Stackhouse, Rip Hamilton, guys that have scored 50 or more points. What I find interesting about Blake, just like the Pistons, nobody talked about them before the season. It's like they've kind of been forgotten in the Eastern Conference. And same thing with Blake Griffin when you look at superstar players, and maybe that'll be motivation for him. That is as well as he's ever played. The only thing he didn't do well, he was 5 of 11 from the free throw line. Other than that, rebounding, scoring, off the charts.
All of that.
And Clinton Yates.
Yeah, people tend to forget who you are when you miss the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, Frank. That's pretty
right.
fair on a lot of levels. But if I'm Blake, all of these things are yes, your game needed to advance, and all that happened. Congratulations to you. You're a leader of one of the franchises that people want to see get back good, and I hope that he stays on that level and doesn't just get angry about it.
Frank, you want to add to that? Go ahead.
I think Clinton's being a little too rough on Blake Griffin. I think what hurt him last year was the trade, and when he got there, missed a bunch of games. It's more about the injuries, and for him to say that in his comment, that part is accurate. Don't get on people for saying you were hurt all the time. You were hurt all the time.
We've seen this from him before, Octobers and Novembers, where he's, you know, MVP candidate, and then the injury comes after that. Anybody think this Pistons team is a playoff team? Anyone going to put him there?
Yes.
Frank is. Okay. All right.
Maybe.
We'll see who's a playoff team when we get to buy or sell on the other side. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Season, 1 week into the season, but there's nothing more peak in the NBA than everybody wanting to weigh in on whether Chris Paul is a good teammate or not. Sure, Big Baby, I'm here for all this, please. Rondo going full Rondo, a pile driver quote about Paul not being a good teammate and denying he spit intentionally. Exasperated while with mouth guard is the defense he's going with. Israel, you're buying Rondo's denial of the spit and the fight defense and the characterization of CP3?
Well, his characterization of Chris Paul is not the first time somebody has suggested that. It's just nobody has said it that plainly before. I think it's a bit over the top, obviously, given these circumstances. I want to believe him about not spitting. I believe everything, you know, in terms of the body, the movements and everything else, the little bit of spittle, as we talked the other day. But it's also Rondo has a history of just getting under people's skin somehow. Maybe he found a way to do that. I don't buy his explanation, but it was really hard to decipher.
KB.
Yeah, I don't know about the teammate part, but I do know specifically about the spittle or spit part and the explanation about wearing a mouthpiece, because I always wear a mouthpiece when I ball, and I know that having something in your mouth creates more saliva in your mouth, and so even if you don't intend to do it,
So you're
will
buying
certainly
it?
come out. Absolutely, I'm buying. He did spit, yes.
How? I mean, well, that was inside information from Black Isola. Of course, you're not playing ball anymore, so you can't possibly rise to the ranks of Blackstone's answer. But go ahead.
Hey, take it easy. Here's my thing with with Rajon Rondo. He's fighting the man here. We all know that Chris Paul, next to LeBron James, most powerful player in the NBA. He's got the State Farm commercials. He's in with the Union, with Adam Silver. So here's poor Rajon Rondo thinking the media is behind Chris Paul. I got to come out and defend myself. And notice what he said. I'm only going to say this one time because that's not Rajon Rondo's way of doing things. I feel like he thinks the whole industry is coming down on him.
Well, let me ask you this then. Do you think NBA players think Chris Paul gets it easy, gets a pass from league office when there is a locker room situation like last year or in this situation?
Whether it's true or not true, I think that players that aren't in that status believe that.
Clinton Yates, how about you?
I'm buying this denial as one that is true in the mind of someone who knows they did the wrong thing. Who's got this kind of chalk talk for their positioning when they would or would not spit and where everybody else would be? That is very weird. Secondarily, shouldn't be knocking on Chris Paul when you were the one, my friend, who got penalized for yelling homophobic slurs at a referee. Little too holier than thou, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, there is the, well, this is Chris Paul's reputation. And then this is the Rajon Rondo's reputation. And then Big Baby gets involved, and you're like, well, this is Big Baby's reputation going on there as well.
Exactly.
We'll move on. Buy or sell two. There have been 6 lowering the head penalties in the NFL this season that have been flagged, per the point of emphasis. But there have not been 6 helmet-to-helmet hits in football this year. Examples of missed calls happen every week, of course. There was another one this past Sunday. Sources say the league is now acknowledging privately the hit on Baker Mayfield should have been flagged. That came halfway through the 4th in a one-score game, in a game that went to overtime, and the Browns eventually lost. How it was explained on the field?
The quarterback was still a runner and therefore is allowed to be hit in the head. He had not yet begun his stride. There is therefore no foul. The result of the play is a first down.
KB, are you convinced the refs and the league are on the same page with this rule?
Absolutely not. I'm convinced that the ref did not read the actual rules that are written. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a ball carrier, a runner. It has to do with whether or not you lead with the helmet, and that player clearly led with the helmet. It's a penalty.
Frank Isola?
Tony, years from now, they're going to teach a class where they're going to say, this is what helmet-to-helmet targeting is, and it's going to be that hit on Baker Mayfield. I was watching on the Red Zone live. I could not believe that a 15-yard penalty wasn't called. And that's the number 1 overall pick. I get that every player in the NFL matters. The number 1 overall pick's getting hit like that, and they were okay with it? Come on.
Lynn Yates?
I've been trained as a viewer to look at certain things and say this is illegal and this is wrong. And all of a sudden, when I see it, it doesn't get flagged. It feels like an insult to my intelligence from the cause that the NFL tells me that they want to try to make better.
I don't know if I see it exactly like that you've been trained and this is an insult to your intelligence, but Gutierrez, how about you?
Yeah, I think the wording of the explanation made it even worse. I agree with everything KB and Frank said, and then you just go out and say it's okay for him to be hit in the head. Whether or not that's legal, whether or not that's true, it just sounds terrible to be saying in an entirely, filled football stadium.
But do you see that as an insult to your intelligence? I guess, Clint, what I'm saying is it's pretty clear they don't know what they're talking about. It's not like they're making an assessment on whether you know
okay,
or
but what I'm saying
know.
is, overall, on trying to claim that you're trying to keep people more safe when you've got situations like what happened with Clay Matthews and Kirk Cousins.
Well, we know what that
and then this isn't a thing.
Yeah.
That's why it's an insult to my intelligence.
This is the business they've chosen situation. This is the sport. This is their only move. We move on. Buy or sell 3. You're buying or selling Derek Carr. Buying or selling his I love being a Raider tweets after all the Sturm und Drang of the trades. Buy or sell his I wasn't crying when I was hurt moment. Buy or sell him saying he doesn't have a fractured relationship with his team. And buy or sell his play this season and last season since he signed the big contract. Frank?
Well, when he says we're going to fight for our cities, he's talking about Oakland or Las Vegas. This year, chalk it up to a disaster for the Raiders. And if they could trade him, you know what? Do it. It seems like all you're doing now is just collecting draft picks.
So you think the Raiders should entertain trading their quarterback?
Why not?
Okay.
Total rebuild.
How about you, Clinton?
Absolutely. It would be unfortunate, but I've told you, this is just another cog in the machine of Gruden trying to buy more time for that crazy contract. You get rid of Carr, you can always say, oh, I didn't have a quarterback. What could I do?
How much more time does he need to buy? He's got a 9.5-year, $93 million remaining on his deal.
And it's going to be a mess until he's gone.
So you would trade Carr as well right now if you were the Raiders in the predicament. Gutierrez, would you?
I would consider it, absolutely, if you get a haul for it. If you look at a desperate team like Jacksonville and get more than you think you would even get for trading, and because they basically got another couple of years, as Clinton said before, they have to try to be good.
All right, so now Carr to Jacksonville is what Israel just said. You want to buy or sell that, Blackistone?
I'll buy it. I mean, look, David Carr is not the quarterback of the future for the Raiders. If he's leasing right now, he should look at that contract. Derek Carr. If he's buying, put up the for sale sign. Gruden didn't want him there anyway.
Enough, Blackistone, even with that slight misspeak. Isola Yates taking the bolt right here. Gutierrez, whole. Kansas 1, Kentucky 2, Gonzaga 3, Duke 4. Who cares? We're not actually talking about that. We only want an excuse to show Zion Williamson highlights and this Duke preseason scrimmage, fake game, whatever you want to call it. Is that enough to give you the very prestigious, very meaningless honor of preseason #1 to Zion and Duke, Israel?
It should be that recruiting class where they have, I don't know, the top 7 players in the class should be number 1. I'm telling you, if it was Kentucky, they'd probably be ranked number 1.
Stop it. I'm not going to start handing out those awards in the month of October when they're playing an HBCU in Virginia Union, which I love. They gave us Terry Davis. They gave us Ben Wallace. But no, it's way too early. Stop.
I don't know. I mean, every time you see Zion, you just have to remind yourself, if he were in the NBA right now, this freshman in college, he'd be the second heaviest player in the NBA, and he still elevates like that. Well, split the point and we'll move on. Showdown 2, the Carolina Hurricanes post-win celebration, lining up on the blue line, sprint sliding into the boards. KB, yay or nay, fair or foul? Wonder why more teams aren't doing this.
I don't wonder why more teams aren't doing it. You know why? Because it's corny. It may be different, but you're a professional team. We don't do that in real life.
You can't be in Showdown and say something's corny. Go ahead, Israel.
I will tell you why more teams don't do it, because as soon as one of those boards gets dislodged, one of the players runs into it and injures a fan or two, they're going to stop doing it right away.
You both are on a show with a mute button. Don't talk to me about corny. Take the FaceTime, Israel. You got 0 points. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Chris Ballard of Sports Illustrated wrote a really good piece on former NBA Commissioner David Stern, and in it they revisited the old Knicks trade to the Los Angeles Lakers involving Chris Paul, and he said he called Dell Demps a lousy general manager and he's probably going to lose Anthony Davis. What did Dell Demps ever do to you? I think he's doing a great job with what he has. The fact that Anthony Davis hasn't even asked for a trade yet is a credit to him. I think they've got a really good team. They're 3-0 this year.